We're going to give it another minute or so that people can join, and then we'll get started.
Maybe while everybody's joining in, if anybody wants to put into chat any AI tools they might be using currently, would be kind of fun to see what people might be exploring. I know I've been using obviously GBT a lot, but I've also been playing a little bit with Lumi, and I've been playing with Otter. So wondering what anybody else might be using.
Okay, we'll give it one more minute till my clock says 12:33, and then we'll get started. Oh, there it goes, 12:33. Okay. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you very much for joining. Today's session, we're going to talk about selecting AI tools for effective teaching and learning. Okay, great. Thanks, Kira. That's good to know. So actually, I wanted to, this presentation, and I'm going to talk about what we're going to talk about. First of all, something that I think might be confusing to people is what exactly is AI? So we're going to talk about defining AI, and then we're going to really speak a lot about the goal of using AI in teaching and learning. Then we're going to describe ways in which, specific things that AI can help us. And then we're going to talk about a few tools and demonstrate a couple of products that people have found useful. And I'm sure that there are more out there, but these are just the ones that kind of struck me as important. Sorry, I cannot turn off the phone. So it'll have to just ring. I can't turn off my mic either because then I can't speak. Okay. All right. So let's go on. Okay. So the first thing we're going to talk about is, well, the goals of using AI. Hold on. I'm sorry. It should stop in a moment. Okay. Oh, thank you for your patience. Okay. So the goals of using AI for teaching and learning, and the first thing we do have to talk about is what is AI? Okay. So how AI, we've all lived through technological changes over the past 20 years. And so how is AI different than something that is not AI? So AI involves machines and software that can perform tasks that require human-like intelligence, such as learning, recognizing patterns, and making decisions. So non-AI software follows fixed instructions, while AI can adapt and improve over time. That is really the basic difference. When you have a Word, you have, let's say Microsoft Word. That's a very, very powerful tool. It allows you to do many, many, many things, but it can't learn to be better than it is already. It doesn't learn from anything that you've done to improve itself. It can help improve your experience by keeping certain defaults that you typically choose. It can choose those defaults as kind of set, but it can't learn that, well, every third time you don't use that default, you use something different. It can't pick up that pattern. But an AI tool can, if it's set up correctly. It can pick up patterns. So that is the real difference between AI and non-AI, is that AI can learn from you using it, it can learn things, whereas regular non-AI software cannot do that. And how did we develop AI? How did that suddenly, in 2023, basically, all of a sudden, boom, become something that people were using? So there were recent advances. So first of all, advances in computing power. Okay, that's something that's has grown over the past 50 years, whereas the 50 years ago, a room would have the same a room of computers or of circuits basically would have the same computing power as you can now hold in your phone. Okay, so that's the right? So things have gotten much more powerful, but over the past 10 years or so, that has really become exponentially more powerful. So that's number one, that the power of computing has accelerated tremendously because AI takes a lot of computing power to use. So before, let's say 2020, we didn't have the computing power. The typical person would not have the computing power to be able to really take any advantage of AI types of things. So that's the first thing. The second thing is data availability. This is something that can be a little controversial, okay? When we talk about the big companies gathering data, such as you do a search on Google and now that's stored somewhere. But one of the things that has helped with is that now we can train AI models on all this data that's now available because before that, there wasn't enough data to be available. Our minds work on billions and billions and billions of pieces of data that we've accumulated over the years. And that's why we are the way we are. So to mimic that in a computer program, it needs a tremendous amount of data to be able to feed into it so that it can start recognizing patterns and become more quote unquote human-like. So now that we have that data availability, we can now allow a computer to learn from that data and start quote unquote thinking, if you want to call it that. It's not thinking at all, it's just comparing facts, comparing data, comparing ones and zeros. That's what it's really doing. But because of the computing power and the data availability, it can start mimicking certain human-like processes. Okay, the other thing has been is that improved algorithms, which are basically uh, steps and processes that you can teach a computer by programming it how to do, that those algorithms have been improved that make AI more effective, efficient, and accessible. So that's how we have gotten to where we are today, as far as technologically. And AI capabilities. So now AI can now handle things that were only possible with humans, such as real language translation and personalized recommendations. Okay, so that is what all of this has allowed AI to do, which can be very, very powerful. Okay, so that's just to give you a little bit of a background, which I think is kind of really necessary. Any questions or comments on this information? Okay, great. So let's move along and let's talk about, so if we're going to use AI for teaching and learning, why are we going to use it? What's the point? What's the goal? So this is my take, okay? And you may have other understandings of this, and we can talk about that. But my take on it is that the primary goal of using AI in teaching is to enhance learning experiences, personalize education, and streamline administrative tasks so that educators can focus more on meaningful student interactions. Okay, it should act as a support tool, not a replacement for human instruction, so that it can foster deeper engagement, adaptability, and efficiency in the classroom. So I'm going to ask for people to perhaps unmute themselves or put in the chat, what do you think about this? Do you think this is missing something? Do you think this is a good goal? Let's talk about that for a few minutes. David, I see you unmuted yourself.
I think it has a tendency to make errors. So I think that it always kind of has to be a secondary tool, because we need to proofread its work and see if it actually knows what it's talking about.
Okay, so this goal of being as a support tool is something that you would support.
I think so, because I don't think we can use it as a primary source of information if it's not going to be fully accurate. And I don't know that there's a way for it to be fully accurate since it's generating content.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, I
Alexis?
agree 100% with what David just said. In fact, I'm using it right now to help me design a workshop for the SLP faculty on test validity. And I ask it to create a spreadsheet for me, and I've had to correct it 3 times. So yeah, I think, but it came up with the format for the spreadsheet, but the content in it was wrong. And I had to keep correcting it and saying to it, go back, double check yourself on that. Are you sure? And it would catch its own mistakes, but it took some training before I got it to the place where it was giving me correct information.
Right, so you were teaching it, so it's not replacing.
No, definitely
yourself,
not replacing, but
it's
definitely
there to support
supporting.
you.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, great. Luke?
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to piggyback off that and say that it's like the primary function of I think should be as, like you said, a support tool, something that can help you with formatting content, organizing your thoughts, and not creating the information, the content for you. As David said, it can often be incorrect. As Alexa said, it can do things wrong. I've even found personally just playing around with it, even when you say, "Are you sure?" It seems its tendency is to say, "Oh, of course you're right," and change it to something else, but not necessarily the right thing still. For example, while I was messing around with it, I asked it, like, what day of the week was February 2nd, 1312? And it would be like, that was a Monday. And then I would go to an actual calendar and flip all the way back. It was a Wednesday, but I'd play a little trick on it and say, aren't you sure? Are you sure it wasn't a Tuesday? Like, oh, you're right. No, it was Tuesday. It's like, well, actually, it was Wednesday. So it's programming is that to speak to you, not necessarily give you factual information. That's a very long-winded way to say that it's method organizing and not creation.
Yeah, okay, great. Yeah, so it does try to give you what it thinks you want. Okay. I would like to focus on a different aspect of this goal though, and that is to the last part, fostering deeper engagement, adaptability, and efficiency in the classroom. What do you think about that? Like, I think that some people are concerned that AI is just going to make us more lazy. Whereas fostering deeper engagement, adaptability, and efficiency in the classroom is something that's going to take some effort. So, what do you think about that as sort of as part of the goal?
I think that there's a difference between doing work that is benefiting your students and doing work just because you've always done that particular work. For example, if ChatGPT could help to sort information from your text into an outline and help you put together your PowerPoint more quickly, which it can do, that time frees up time for you to give more detailed feedback, to interact with your students, maybe to think through other lesson activities you would like to do. And as long as you're proofreading that work that it did and not just copy pasting it verbatim, then I don't know that it's necessary to do that extra work just to say, well, I did it the right way. I typed all of this out. Um, if the end result's going to be the same, I think it's really about what the purpose of that work is.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Cindy?
I think a lot of this is going to be, or should I say need, a foundation in the classroom for the students. In other words, being upfront with the students and emphasizing how they're going to use AI, the purpose of it, and then what comes after that, what the instructor is expecting. Because again, I think we're looking at it from a certain perspective, how it can enhance learning. But I still see the younger generation of, this is gold, it's going to do the work for me, whatever it spits out is okay, and I'm going to go with it. So I think there's going to have to be a foundational element of instruction in the beginning of, here's what we're using, here's what we're going to use it for, and here's what we're going to discuss or reflect on when using that, or what I expect afterwards. Because I think that end step, the students just want to skip. And I could be wrong, but that's what I'm getting in the communication with me from students. Like, well, AI did this, what's the problem? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I really
definitely.
like the goal, how you have everything articulated here. But I think a lot of this is going to depend on how we communicate in our instruction with the students about this and what
Oh,
they can
definitely.
expect.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it works for us as instructors as well. Like, if indeed we use it as a support tool, and thereby we now have more time for fostering deeper engagement on a personal level without the AI, because we've taken off some administrative tasks that have taken our time. So now we use that time to indeed foster deeper engagement. That's great, right? But we have to make sure that we're not just relying on AI. Even if we check our work, okay, great, it gave us an outline, we look it over, it's great. But now, okay, I just used 3 minutes or whatever, let's say half an hour instead of the 3 hours it would have taken me. What am I now going to do with those 3 hours? Am I going to just, okay, well, I'm free now, or is that going to help me now spend more time with my students? Right. So I think that that's, important for us as well to recognize what our goal is in this. Okay, any other questions, comments about this? Any part that maybe stands out to you that I didn't highlight? Anything you would add to it or feel is not so important and would take away?
I just want to chime in that I think Cynthia is absolutely correct. And we need to, as faculty members, as teachers, we need to make it clear to our students what our expectations are regarding AI. And I think regardless of whether we're intentionally integrating it into our classroom or not, we do need to let them know what's acceptable and not acceptable, because they're going to default to it. And I think Cynthia is 110% correct. It's not just AI, it's Google and Google Scholar, that the students don't understand the core essence of prompt engineering or search strategies. And they think whatever immediately pops into their head and they throw into a search strategy, whether it's an AI bot or if it's Google or whatever, they think that that's the only way it can be said, and whatever spits out at them is gospel truth. And that's where I think we need to be facilitating more instruction around information and critical digital literacies.
Yeah, I think that's 100% correct. I really think that is a separate lunch and learn you know,
Oh
that
my God, it's
maybe,
absolutely a separate
know,
lunch and learn, but
and
I
I
think that
think
it
that
goes hand in hand with what Cynthia was saying. And I think that
definitely,
that also supplements what we're thinking about as a support tool.
yes, definitely, 100%. And I actually think that that might be something that's really worthwhile talking about, that I know a lot of instructors are very concerned about. And, you know, instructors trying to bend over backwards to stop their students from using AI, and don't think that's going to work. It would be a little bit like saying, sorry, you can't use your phone ever. You know, it's not going to work. It's just not going to happen. So helping them see the value of AI as a support, as opposed to, you know, doing the work for me, I think is very important. And then again, what do we do with that extra time that we have available to us? Okay. All right, let's move on. Okay. So what can AI help with? And these are kind of specific kinds of things. So number one, it can help with personalized learning and adaptive assessment. Okay. I chose these specific things because these are things that we can, to a certain extent here at Carlow, actually do, even though there could be AI tools that we don't have available to us at Carlow that could do an even better job of this. And I'm not going to focus on the tools out there that are going to cost whatever. I'm going to really focus on some free tools that can help us. But one of the things that, for example, with personalized learning, if let's say you have an exam, okay, and you have a foreign student with um, a, a reading level, an understanding level of a university student, but in reading level in English of, let's say, a sixth grader or an eighth grader. Can you then ask ChatGPT or some other AI tool to reword this exam on a level of in the language of an eighth grader, so that you can let this student adapt? They can learn the chemistry or whatever it is that they're learning. They have no problem with that. It's just the language that's the barrier. So can you help them by rewording, using AI to reword the quiz on a eighth grade level, on their reading level, so that they can actually succeed at that quiz? That's something that you can do. So that would be personalized or adaptive assessment. You know, personalized learning. Those you know, those are things that we can use AI to do to help us to allow students to succeed better. Okay, that's just one example, and we can kind of think. One of the things that AI really does, one of the challenges we have with it is, how can we think creatively enough to be able to use the tools effectively? Because that's something that to we need to, like, imagine what would we want AI to help us with? You know, where are the barriers that we're finding to ourselves or to students? How can AI help us with those? And that's something that's really powerful that we can really use. Okay. Another thing is enhanced engagement. Okay. It's very, you know, AI is very engaging. We all know that. Can we use AI to have the students go to AI, for example, and you know, and do something that will enhance their engagement? For example, maybe AI could help them consider different science experiments. If they, let's say, a chemistry class, okay, um, it's a little, it would be a little bit like, and not completely like, but a little bit like having somebody go over to a friend, and so who's very knowledgeable, and say, you know, well, give me an example of something I might want to do as a science experiment. Or could, if let's say you have an English class and you're trying to show the development of the English language over time? Could the student have AI write their essay, they write an essay, and then have them write it in Old English? So that they can see how would this have looked like 200, 500 years ago. So that would engage the student in, like, the student doesn't know and couldn't do that on their own, but this would engage the students' creativity, engage the students with understanding more than we could possibly do in the classroom. And if we could maybe present it, but if the student can go themselves and get that result, that's far more engaging than if we just hand it to them. Okay, automating administrative tasks. So Alexis, your idea of creating a spreadsheet, that's an administrative task that if we can let somebody else do, if we would have a secretary and we could say, could you please do this for me? That would really save us time. We don't necessarily have the skill to be able to do it as effectively as somebody else does. So we could definitely take some of those administrative tasks and hand them over to AI to help us in those things. We could ask it to create a rubric. Now, obviously, we wouldn't necessarily want to use that rubric as AI spits it out, but it could give us a framework. Maybe we would notice things in the rubric that the AI has produced that would say, you know what, that's really a good idea. I do want to add that into my rubric. I wouldn't have thought of that myself. But that doesn't mean we should just like, okay, spit me out a rubric, for an essay of 100 words or, whatever it is. And then just say, okay, great, this is the rubric. No, we obviously have to focus on what is important in this essay writing, etc. And that's how we would adjust the rubric based on what AI starts with. But the framework, having that framework there to start off with is very helpful. That's an administrative task that they can do. Another administrative task is something that we do all the time, but we could do this even more. So having a self-graded test is something that we do all the time. We have multiple choice and we let the computer grade it, right? Now, what would happen if we would have AI give us a preliminary grade for something a little more complicated? Okay, so we can ask AI to look over this student's essay for grammar errors. Okay, and kind of gather them together. Then we can decide, well, first of all, maybe it's not even really a grammar error, right? And so we can kind of weed through it and decide, is this something I want to point out? Maybe the AI points out 25 grammar errors. And we said, that's really too much to show to the students. So I'm going to selectively decide which ones I want to point out to the student. So that's AI can kind of help gather that information. And then you as the instructor have to create that deeper personal relationship by using that information and knowing, well, this student, this would be appropriate for them. So that's an administrative task that AI can assist with. Again, that's support rather than that doing it on its own. Okay, simulations and virtual learning. This is really fascinating. And this is something that I've actually done a few times for myself, which is really fascinating. If you could tell a chat bot to behave, let's say, like Abraham Lincoln, and then then have the students interact with that chat bot. So I've tried it and I said, like, okay, here, chatbot, you behave like Abraham Lincoln. And also to tell it what it knows, and all the history and all the strategies of war and stuff like that. And I asked it then, okay, Mr. Lincoln, why did you start the Civil War? Okay, that was what I said as the student interacting with this. And then Abraham Lincoln gave me a whole thing like, well, this is a misunderstanding. I did not start the Civil War. Like, so this gives like a personalized interview, so to speak, with with let's say a historical figure or something like that, or somebody having experienced a hurricane, for example. Somebody who's so you can tell the chat to behave like somebody who's experienced that. Now, obviously, the student is going to have to check facts, right? So the chat bot is going to respond, and then the student is going to have to think of, is that really true? Does that really make sense? Are the facts really correct? So it engages the student in a virtual learning experience that they then have to make sure was really correct. And that's really helps them get a better idea of what somebody might say and then be able to kind of respond back like, hey, hold on, that's not really true. Look at the history that I have in my my fact book. That's not really true. So kind of having a debate with let's say Abraham Lincoln or somebody about some political something. So it's a way of really helping students have simulations and virtual learning that they on a deeper level than they would be able to do that just in the classroom. Like if let's say you would have in a classroom 2 years ago, you would say, well, you dress up as Abraham Lincoln and I'm going to debate against you. That's going to be limited to the amount of knowledge that this one student who's now Abraham Lincoln is able to accumulate. Whereas ChatGPT or whatever this other thing might have greater knowledge and might really be able to become Abraham Lincoln to a greater extent. Not perfectly, but to a greater extent than somebody just playing that role in the classroom. So that's where things like that might help. Any comments or questions about what I've said? And you can say, I believe this is all baloney. That is a legitimate comment. Use your critical thinking. What I'm saying is not gospel. It's just my thoughts.
So, Carolyn, I think this is Beth. I think it goes back to David's thing about you are relying on the accuracy then of Abraham Lincoln, like who's feeding into Abraham Lincoln. And so I think the amount of vetting you'd have to do to make sure it's going to correctly resource the facts is really where you'd also have to do a lot of this work to help you.
Well, first of all, yeah, go ahead, David.
I don't think you should rely on it to give you facts at all. I think you should give it facts and then ask it to perform tasks with those facts, because it doesn't really have good research capabilities and it doesn't really have up-to-date info anyway. But for example, this morning there was an instructor who wanted information about using it to help put PowerPoints together based upon, say, an article. And when I input into the free version of ChatGPT the text of an article, and then asked it to put together an outline with 4 bullets per topic, it did an extremely accurate job of reading the article, breaking it down into a neat, orderly outline, and glancing through it, I saw 2 errors it made. It messed up a couple of proper names that I would have needed to correct if I was actually going to paste that stuff into a PowerPoint. But even without being told that I wanted it for a PowerPoint, it got the text and the layout pretty much like a PowerPoint would look. And with very minimal editing, I could have made a PowerPoint about this news article and had that administrative work done. So I think it is good at things like that. Like, here is information that I'm telling you is true. Organize this information in this way, or create questions based on this information I'm giving you, or do something with this information. But I think asking it, who was involved in blank in 1814 I think it's very bad at that. And I don't think that's a good use of it.
Okay, so I'm going to respond to that. So first of all, it is getting better, which is something that we have to recognize. But second of all, part of that assignment, let's say with Abraham Lincoln, can be, okay, now that you've had this chat, are you sure that what Abraham Lincoln said was actually accurate? Can you go back and check that what Abraham Lincoln said was accurate? So that's part of the assignment, is not relying on Abraham Lincoln as really, okay, I really had a good conversation with Abraham Lincoln, but it's to see it, it's, let's say, what is that perspective? And maybe, really, if I was really having a conversation with Abraham Lincoln, right? He's going to have a view of the facts that maybe I have a different view of anyway, right? Because that's the way people are. So the it's valuable as far as it goes. Like, in order, again, as you said, to say, do you have to check every fact? Yes, you probably do, but is that the goal of this conversation? To check every fact? Maybe the goal is to see another perspective on something, which is not going to always be completely factual. It's going to be based on a person's perception. So I'm just saying that it's I wouldn't necessarily grade based on that interaction, and I would caution students to say, this is not Abraham Lincoln, and maybe you're going to have to check the facts, but that doesn't take away from that interaction that gives a different perspective. Does that make sense? Okay, I guess it does, or it doesn't. Okay. Yes, Cindy.
I was just wanted to say, I think this makes perfect sense. And the whole thing with me is it's preparing students when they go out into the workplace and they're using these tools, that they're wiser now on what the tool is giving them.
Yeah.
So we're actually teaching them the limits of the tool as well as the efficiencies of it.
Right. 100%. I think that that's an excellent point. I mean, it's kind of almost the same as teaching a student how to use spell check. So the spell checker changes it to a different word, and you didn't mean that word. You really meant something else, but it wasn't smart enough to pick up what you really meant. Even though you spelled it wrong. So so it's teaching students how to use the tool in ways that are, that can be helpful. Okay, great. So now we have about 20 minutes left, and I did want to show a few different products that we do have available to us, and some of them are, okay, let's start. Number one is Copilot. Copilot is basically the ChatGPT that's run under Microsoft. And because we have, as a university, we have a Microsoft license, you can all go to all the apps that you get in Microsoft, and you can get Copilot. And it's very similar to ChatGPT. It definitely has a different flavor. Okay, it's a little bit like you're talking to a different person, if you want to call it that, than you are when you're talking to ChatGPT. I have found it less friendly in a certain sense. I've also found it less intuitive. Like, I ask it to do something for me, and then it has certain suggestions. Would you like more information on X? Would you like me to reformat this in such a way, or something like that? And it's almost always off on what it's suggesting. Like, maybe I haven't played with it enough and it doesn't know me well enough yet, but that's just what I found. I found that typically ChatGPT has had better suggestions. Like, when I ask it for something and then it's more intuitive in the sense of understanding where am I probably going next with this? What might I want to go further with this? I haven't found that Copilot is as good at that, but that's okay. It's good at, it is, I find it's better structured. I have found that it is somewhat more accurate when I do something in Copilot versus ChatGPT. I will find that Copilot tends to be somewhat, this is only I haven't done any studies on it, but I have found that the information it gives is somewhat more accurate. Of course, I still have to review it and make sure that I am well aware of what that it's not 100% accurate, but I found it to be better at that. And it could also be just for the things I'm asking it for. And when you ask it for something, it may be totally way off, more than ChatGPT. So you got to play with it, but it's very similar to ChatGPT. Okay. Something I discovered, which is really, I found it very powerful, is something called Brisk Learning. It's actually an add-on to, it's an extension to your Chrome browser. And I'm going to actually show you, let me share. I'm going to just share my whole screen. You don't gasp at all my things that I have up here. Okay. So this is, I'm going to move out of the way. When I turn on my Brisk, this is the extension. When I turn it on, I get, I should get, maybe it's not working because I'm sharing. I haven't tried it when I'm sharing, but usually there's a little icon down here that allows me to edit it, turned it on. Let's see. Hold on, what was that? This can read. When I click the extension, I did on all sites. Okay, I'm not sure, but oh, here we go. Okay, here is the Brisk Learning thing. So if I'm here, I can, when I'm on any site, I can ask it to create something. I can ask it to create a quiz, a rubric, etc., etc., all these different things that it will create based on the site that I have up here. So if I have an article, I can ask it to, where was that? To change the, okay, it might be kind of further down into the lesson plan translation. I can ask it for a lot of things. One of the things that was very powerful, and you got to play with this, and it's free to any, I can, let's say, create a quiz based on this. Create a quiz about this thing, university level, multiple choice, 10 questions. Okay, so if I do that, I'm going to create a new doc. Now this is the one thing about it, is that this works in Google. It does not work in, it's going to open a Google document for me. Okay, and then it's going to create that quiz. It's not going to open up Microsoft. Apparently, they are working on letting it connect to Microsoft, and it will open up a Microsoft document. But this is what it's doing right now. It's creating for me a quiz based on a website that I have with all the answers. Now, obviously, I got to check it, make sure these are the questions I want to ask, etc. This is just a support to help me. I can also Okay, rewrite, I can make it shorter. Okay, so find this document. Okay, so here's a shortened version of the quiz with 5 questions. Okay, so I can really play with this. This is a very helpful thing, making more difficult, less difficult, etc. Okay, I can translate this into another language. Okay, I haven't tried this, but let's say translate it into Dutch. Okay, and then it can translate it for me. Now, we don't have too much language things, but for an ESL student, this might be wonderful for you to translate something into another language. Okay, so this is, you can go to Brisk Learning, or I think it's called Brisk Learning, and you can sign up for this, and it has a lot of very powerful tools that a teacher can use to support your what you're trying to do. It can also, if you had this, it can also give feedback on an essay, which is what I was talking about. It will point out all the grammar errors, etc. And you can just copy and paste it, but that is definitely not what we're recommending that you do. Okay, so this was I really like this because it kind of follows you around to any website you might want to, like if you have a website about your topic that you want to summarize for students or something like that, you can do that with this Brisk. Okay, how much time do we have? We only have a few more moments. So I'm going to stop sharing this and go back to the PowerPoint. Okay, and now I will let you scroll if you'd like. Okay, here we are. So another one is quizzes. Quizzes is something that Carlow University has. It's not Carlow who has it, it's the campus school that has it. But you can use it. You do have to request to be enabled in it, and then the IT gives you access to it. I didn't find it as helpful as I would have liked, but I tried to have a video. If you you can upload a video or just point it to a video in YouTube and have it create quizzes at certain stop points in that video for you. It wasn't able to do it. I tried to do it with a video about machine learning, a 10-minute video, just with understanding what machine learning is, and it wasn't able to do it. So I don't think it's really focused on university level, even though it says that it's available for university level. But I do think it's more for K through 12. But you could try that out and see if you can, play around with it. If nothing else, it allows you to create questions on a YouTube video. So the students are watching the YouTube video and it stops wherever you say to have a question about this video. So I thought that even if nothing else, that might be useful for people, more interactive for the students. It's not really AI because it didn't make questions for me. I had to do it myself, but it still is a valuable tool maybe for that. And since we have it available to us through the campus school, I just thought that would be something I would bring up here. Okay, another one is called Magic School AI. So Magic School AI, let me share my screen again. Just share the whole screen. Move you out of the way. Here we go. Magic School AI is becoming a much more powerful tool than it was. It is originally for K through 12, but it's been adding university level features. Okay, we're not going to watch the video, but you can get things, a YouTube video summarizer. There's a lot of stuff that you can do here, specific for teachers that, you know, that could be very helpful. It's really shaping up its act. When I first was introduced to this, it wasn't long ago. It was maybe 2 months ago. It was much more amateurish in its presentation, and really did not have the capabilities it has now. So it's definitely developing. And so even if you can't use it right now, nothing really appeals to you, I would suggest you come back to it in 2 months' time and see what it's like then, because it is in the process of developing, and it's free. So the other thing that I really did like is that it has student AI literacy. There's a whole section about that, that so we can, right, so that you can have the students sign up, and the students can build their AI literacy skills, because it has different modules about what is AI and how can I best use it. So that those are really much more for K-12 right now, but I'm going to assume that they're going to develop higher level things, but you may be able to pull out some things that would be useful for you as well. Okay, and then the last thing, we only have a couple minutes left. The last thing is ChatGPT, which is free and it's very popular. I do think it is getting better. AI, that is the kind of like the value of AI is that it gets better. But as David keeps pointing out, it still is not human, and it is not accurate. Even a human might not be accurate, but it is not. Don't assume that because it's AI, it's going to be accurate. The parts that it's getting better on are not necessarily the facts. The part that it's getting better on is intuiting more of what are you looking to do? How are you looking to use the tool to make it more efficient for you? That's one of the main ways it's getting better. So it's, which is different than the product getting better. The product it produces may be getting better, but what's really getting better is that it allows you for you to use it more efficiently. That's how it learns and gets better. So if you want to spend the next 5 minutes playing around with one of the things that are on the that are on my slides, let me again share my slides. And there are, as Alexis mentioned, there are many other tools out there. I just kind of handpicked a few of them, but that's definitely not what. Okay, so can you add Brisk Learning? Right now, you cannot add it onto the Firefox browser. It's just a Chrome thing, but you know, maybe they're going to be they are definitely working on a connection to Word, instead of just having it as a Google Doc. That's where it produces everything. It's going to give you the option of opening up Word instead and having it in Word. But I guess it's iterating on a, you know, however it's going to improve. It probably might be based on what people want. So if you would like it to be in Firefox, go ahead and tell them, because chances are they will take that into account if they get enough of that response. Okay, any final comments? Anybody want to say anything specific they got out of this?
I can't wait to play with Magic School.
Yeah, it's pretty, it's getting much more powerful. It is pretty impressive what it's done. It used to be kind of like childish, and the person who started it is actually just he's either a high school or like early level college student who just kind
Wow.
of pulled a bunch of stuff together, and now he's really like making it more polished.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for this, Caroline. This was so
Okay,
helpful.
well, my pleasure. And please, your feedback on this is also very important. If anybody doesn't like what I said, that's important too. Anybody has a different opinion about something, that this is, as I said, this is not, this is evolving, so this is going to change. Just as the last thing, do I ever think it's going to take over humanity? No, I don't. Do I think that people might let it take over their own lives? Yes, I think that's we're seeing that happen. People just saying, okay, I don't have to. Okay, so I'm not so familiar with Sketchwell. I think anything that makes something more engaging visually is definitely worth it for those who are visual learners. I think we have to be careful that we don't assume everybody's a visual learner and it's going to appeal to everybody. But that's a pedagogical thing rather than an AI thing, right? I think that, I think also sometimes we're so involved in the eye candy that it takes away from the content we're trying to, you know, okay.
I mean, he's not going to, Luke, I'm plugging Luke's session on April 9. He's probably not going to talk about Sketchwell. But I do want to say that Luke, we're excited about your session, and it'll be all things video and how AI is creating some really interesting content visually.
Yeah,
And I use interesting very, very directly.
yeah. And so, for video, that's what we're into is visual. Even though I actually just got off a Panopto webinar that talks about, what do they call it? Audio description for people who can't see the video, so they get audio description. So, okay, excellent. Thank you, everybody, for joining. And please, any feedback is definitely helpful. And we will post this on our site as soon as possible. Okay, thanks a lot. Yes, have a good day. Take care, everyone.